Hi, everyone. This is exciting. This is our weekly Wellness Wednesday, Desire Wellness with Nurse Practitioner Deidre Arms from Ohio. And she is here to answer questions. We had so many the past few weeks talking about insulin resistance. And so we decided we needed to dedicate an entire episode of Desire Wellness Wednesday to talking about insulin resistance. And so thank you so much, Deidre, for again taking time out, donating your time to help us educate patients on so many different topics. The past few weeks has been just incredible because you don't hear doctors talking about the nutrient deficiencies caused by a lot of the medications. So we've talked about magnesium deficiencies, B vitamin deficiencies, iron deficiencies over the past few weeks. And make sure if you have missed those episodes, go to youtube.com/the way to my heart and click on Deidre's own playlist for Desire Wellness. And we have chopped up all of these interviews that she has done the past few weeks talking about these different nutrient deficiencies and what you can do about them, how you can get tested for them, all of the above, just by clicking on her playlist. So this one will be there as well in case you don't have time to be here for the entire episode. We are going to have this available for replay at youtube.com/the way to my heart. Don't forget, subscribe. And with that, Deidre, again, thank you for being here.
You're welcome. This is such a hot topic. I feel like I talk about it every day. So I'm excited to dig into it and answer some of the questions. We had a lot of great questions presented in the week leading up to this. So hopefully I get to everybody's.
I mean, I think that there's just so much confusion. And I think when you're talking about insulin resistance, I think even doctors get confused. I mean, do they have type 1? Do they have type 2? Do they have insulin resistance? Is that insulin resistance? Can you break it down for us? And let's just first make it clear in defining insulin resistance for everybody.
Okay, so insulin resistance, to better understand it, it is where insulin is made by our cells in the pancreas, right? And it's critical to maintaining our healthy blood sugar levels. Insulin resistance is a condition where the cells become dysfunctional. So they no longer work properly and they're unable to respond properly to insulin signals. So this makes it difficult for glucose to enter into the cell and to be used as fuel by our tissues, such as muscle, liver, brain. And insulin resistance further contributes to inflammation, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, fatty liver, and type 2 diabetes is what we're looking at. So if you think about somebody who has normal insulin signaling, so let's say this is your normal intracellular glucose, the first thing that happens is insulin binds to the receptor side on it if it's functioning properly. And then they always say it's like a lock and a key, shake it right in there, and then the glucose can enter into the cell and transport it effectively into the bloodstream. But what happens with insulin resistance is that dysfunction where at that receptor site, right, where it should bind, insulin should be able to bind, it does not. It's not able to bind and lock and enter into the cells. And so then that leaves glucose outside of the cell, not being able to be transferred or transported into the bloodstream like it's supposed to do.
And how is that? So how's that different? So then you have type 2 diabetes.
So it's actually different from type 1 and type 2. So type 1 is an autoimmune condition where the body
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah, where it attacks insulin producing beta cells in the pancreas, right? And so you can be insulin resistant and not be a type 1 diabetic. So
Okay.
And so type 1 diabetes is autoimmune and it leads to little or no insulin production. in the body. And it typically occurs in childhood or adolescence. These people are typically younger when they're diagnosed. And then when we look at type 2, that's a metabolic disorder. So you're looking primarily, it's a disorder that is characterized by insulin resistance. So insulin resistance typically happens up to 10 years before the blood sugar dysregulation happens and people become diabetic. And so when you look at what's really happening in the body, when someone is insulin resistant, that's when the cardiovascular changes start to happen well before they become diabetic. So you've got 10 years of things going on underlying where we're not catching that if we're not looking for it, right? Looking for insulin resistance. The type 2 diabetes usually develops in adulthood, although we are seeing children with type 2 diabetes now, but it's metabolic. So that's metabolic dysfunction, and type 1 is autoimmune as well. So,
and type 1 can also be brought on by sudden trauma or medication injuries as well, is because we have a couple of people with that. My grandfather ended up had his pancreas crushed in a car accident and ended up type 1 diabetic, insulin dependent at that point. And so, and that's where people, always ask me, what's your personal connection to PAD or peripheral artery disease? It's that he ended up with aortoiliac disease, which is a part of peripheral artery disease. And he had grafts put in, the grafts got infected, and he went septic. So that's my peripheral artery disease connection. But yeah, he ended up type 1 diabetic from a car accident. But type 2 diabetes is something, there are things you can control with that, right?
there is, the genetic piece of everything we can't control, but our lifestyle, I've said this before, genetics loads the gun, lifestyle pulls the trigger. That's commonly said. So what we do in our lifestyle can turn on or turn off disease. And so the way we eat, the way we exercise, the way we work on stress, our microbiome and gut health, all of that plays into expression of diabetes, insulin resistance.
So I watched this TEDx presentation recently by a doctor who said that if you are deemed diabetic, make sure you know whether you are insulin resistant. Why is that?
Well, understanding insulin resistance will help you to tailor your treatment. But like I said, you can look at insulin resistant and know how insulin resistant you are. Know that those cardiovascular effects are happening with that insulin resistance as well as the glucose piece of it. It can indicate progression of a disease, looking at that, because I have had people with an A1C, which is what we typically monitor for blood sugar and glucose, at like 4.9, but be so insulin resistant. I've grown an insulin level and it be 65. So there's so much dysfunction happening downstream that it really can help tailor how we care for our patients, and help control blood sugar levels if we know what's going on with insulin.
We'll get into kind of how they would treat it differently in a moment, but what actually causes this insulin resistance? The TEDx talk that I ended up watching, and I think it was actually Marcia, who's in our live studio audience. I think she might have sent it to me, but the doctor, it was like, which comes first, the chicken or the egg? I mean, does obesity cause insulin resistance, or does insulin resistance cause obesity? And the same thing, like, does type 2 cause insulin resistance? Does insulin resistance cause type 2?
And so I think that's where it comes in to be individual, right? So we know that there are some causes of insulin resistance, like obesity, eating sugar, high processed foods, your inactivity, your dietary deficiencies, if you have elevated uric acid levels, if you have chronic stress, or environmental factors. But then on the other hand, we have sometimes like a young woman who isn't eating bad, but yet she has PCOS and It's not the lifestyle part, it's the insulin piece at the ovarian level that changed that trajectory for her. And then that started to like cause the things to happen with weight gain and everything. So I
Mhm.
really say it's real individual. You have to look at the whole picture of what is going on. Like for females, we look at, are they cycling? What has happened there? Was that always regular? Looking at the ovaries. At least for me, that's something that I look into. But then it is complicated because if you are eating those highly processed foods, then you're putting yourself at risk. Or if you have less inactivity, and then that genetic component that can fall into that.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead.
That fat around the abdomen, right? It can contribute. So where you wear your fat is like it's important, right? So if you're more apple shaped, we're getting like the fat around the organs and everything, and that can increase your insulin resistance. Where people who have more pear shaped bodies, so that's less on the organs of the fat, and so they tend to have less of this happen.
So, what role do, the cravings, play for carbs, starchy foods, fatty, sugary foods? Can you blame it on having this insulin resistance, or is it kind of vice versa? The insulin resistance happens because you end up liking these foods, wanting more of these foods. Also, portion sizes are an issue.
Right. I mean, it used to be like back in the 50s, if you were to pull up and eat a hamburger meal, you were getting the equivalent of a kid's meal at McDonald's. And now a hamburger meal is like four times that size, right?
Yes.
But can we blame the cravings and our portion size? I would say it can contribute to that increase. Cravings for carbohydrates, right? It becomes an addiction. Carbs, sugars, those foods like are more powerful and addictive than they even say a cocaine addiction for many people. So it's really hard for people once they start to eat like that to control that as well. And also, that's what leads to overeating and having these
Yeah.
larger portions as well. So we're compensating for that inefficient glucose utilization. There's some really good research like evolving on basically obesity medicine and leptin and ghrelin, so that your hunger satiety hormone plays into that. If insulin is becoming resistant, then leptin, which is your satiety hormone, can also be resistant. So we know it's more than just telling somebody don't eat this food because the hormones are signaling abnormally. So
So you can be thin and be insulin resistant.
yes, you can.
Are you still showing areas of stored fat even if thin at that point? I mean, I've seen thin people with, a little bit more than a love handle, but you can't tell. I mean, they're thin all over, but then there's just this one area that you're like, it's kind of odd, just
Right.
around the belly.
And so factors such as their genetics or if they have a sedentary lifestyle, like are they eating the highly processed foods can contribute to that. But you also have to see, I have seen thin people be very healthy, unhealthy on the inside, right? Because where's the fat? Is it around the organs? That makes a difference. Like maybe they're not showing obesity, but they do have like fat around the organs and everything.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
I remember I went to the gym and I was starting a new workout program. I'm actually pretty embarrassed by this, but it is a funny story. So I'm fairly thin, but back then I had just started getting into kind of working out and getting back into water ski shape. And so I went to the gym, went to this trainer, and he did the body fat index, all that stuff. And he looks at me, he's like, you're the fattest thin person I've met in a long time. I was completely insulted. And I said, damn, it must have been that last dollop of mayonnaise. And I was kind of half joking because so many people say they don't like the white cream, but I'm obsessed with mayonnaise. So it's something that I have to control. It's terrible. That best foods, man, is my best food. Not necessarily my best friend though. But I remember there was a gentleman that was there, and I ended up dating this other gentleman that was standing by, and he was listening to the whole thing. And he ended up for Valentine's Day that year. He brought me, had sent flowers, told the front desk not to send him to me until he could show up with a jar of mayonnaise. Yeah, that was a keeper. Yeah, great story. Single at 48. Um, so now I know why. He didn't bring me a jar of mayonnaise. So, okay. What are the signs of insulin resistance?
Okay, so we have quite a few like common signs of insulin resistance. Um, Signs would include like skin changes, so that acanthosis nigricans, which is a darkening, velvety patchy on the skin. You may see it on the neck, you may see it in the axilla in some people. That can be a sign of insulin resistance. Here's one you guys are going to be surprised: skin tags. When we see skin tags, we think insulin resistance.
Are you serious? I just saw something about that, and I get those emails that are all sponsored, and then you have to click on a video and whatever. And the headline said, "What skin tags tell you about your health." So
Mhm.
this must have been, I didn't click through, but I would imagine that this would be exactly what they
Insulin.
were talking about.
Yeah.
Interesting. Why is that?
It's just a manifestation on the skin, like those two conditions of the darkening or the, I really don't think we know why it happens. We just know it correlates. So
Wow.
that's why like those physical assessments with your providers are really important. We love telehealth, but we can't see everything telehealth, right? I couldn't tell you, Kim, if you had a skin tag at all, you know? And this is
Nope.
the equivalent of a telehealth,
Covered
right?
all the way.
So,
And it's 90 degrees out too.
yeah. And so the increased hunger cravings is another sign of that as well. Feeling fatigued, and as that's a reoccurring thing, right? Fatigue is a reoccurring thing. So it's when somebody comes in with fatigue, there's the differential diagnosis of that and what could be wrong is huge, right? Because every week we talk, one of the signs is fatigue. If
Yeah.
you're having difficulty concentrating, that can be insulin resistance. If your blood pressure is increasing, that again, elevated triglycerides, right? Because when you're doing your lipids, your cholesterol panel, your triglycerides will elevate in relationship to what's happening with the insulin and glucose. So when you start to see that trend, we need to look a little bit deeper, like why is that happening? As well. Abdominal weight gain, so it's happening in the midsection, can be another. And if you're having trouble losing weight, that's another, sign of insulin resistance. Like, why am I doing all the right things, but I'm not changing the dial type thing?
How do you talk to your doctor about that? Is this something that I can imagine going to you that you're going to pick up on it right away? But, I would almost imagine that this isn't something that's top of mind for doctors, because even my dad, we didn't know he was insulin resistant until he went and got a Boston Heart Diagnostics, exhaustive cardiovascular blood panel. His
Right.
regular doctor didn't do it. They just basically glucose, A1C, that's it.
Yeah.
But insulin resistance is an entirely different test.
Right. So, and honestly, it's if you have them draw an insulin level, a fasting insulin with that glucose, right? And there's a calculation you can do. It's called a HOMA IR, HOMA/IR, and it's a homeostat. Basically, it's looking at insulin resistance. You could type in HOMA IR calculation, put your insulin level in and your glucose, and it spits out a number for you. If it's two or greater, that's insulin resistance, right? And so you can have an insulin level of even like 6 to 10, which like is not flagging high in a lab because under 25 we consider normal. But have a glucose of 90, and that'll be a 2 right there. So that lets us know downstream that insulin is a problem. You are insulin resistant. and we can take action on that. So it's as simple as asking them to draw on insulin also with that glucose and calculating that out to know.
And what action? So you mentioned there's action that we can take. What is the treatment? Is there a treatment for insulin resistance in particular? What role does the doctor play versus you as the patient? I would imagine you'd have to be a partner in your care with this
Right.
to improve your numbers.
Right, because there's going to be things on your behalf that you'll do. And I will say it's a lot of lifestyle-based medicine, right? We need to change it before it becomes diabetes, because diabetes is when we have all the medications that can help with that, right? But looking at a low glycemic impact diet, so limiting your sugar, the Mediterranean diet, we talk about that a lot. It's the best diet out there because it really focuses on whole foods. It focuses on increasing your fruits, vegetables, your whole grains. Having 3 to 5 well-balanced meals throughout the day, separating that out, getting your lean proteins. One of the episodes we talked about, grass finished beef also. So looking at the best form of what we can get and managing our portion size. And I've seen a question in here about portion size, right? If you look at the My Plate that's available, so looking at how our plate should look, half of that plate should be your vegetables and your fruit, and then a small portion of meat. And usually it's about the size of your palm and thickness with your protein there, whatever protein you choose. And then, some healthy fats and some smaller amount of carbs. Really hard to do when you're eating at a buffet though. So always work on that
You
sequence.
gotta maximize your money there.
Yeah, right.
That's what they say.
But if you're going to do that, if you're really going to go for it and go to a buffet, we've talked about eating the sequence in which you eat. So make sure
Yeah.
you eat those vegetables so that the fiber slows down a glucose spike, then your protein. And then I guess that's when you go hard at the buffet if you're splurging. Don't splurge all the time though, but yeah.
No, but I mean, it's actually the buffet is the best place to actually be able to select your foods versus if you're sitting there at the table, you take what you're served. But when you go to the buffet, it's actually where I started learning to eat vegetables because they had such an array of vegetables and they had all kinds of seeds and nuts. They had pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, they had tomatoes and olives and peppers and all kinds of things that you could actually, taste the rainbow right then and there on one plate and really maximize your money. They're doing
Yeah.
that and really enjoy what you're eating and knowing you're eating something healthy and eat a lot of that good stuff, right?
Right. You have the ability to really fill that plate with vegetables, get the fiber that is needed. Remember, females approximately 35 grams of fiber, male approximately 45 grams of fiber. So if you're at a buffet, like start with those vegetables and get as much of that in, then follow with your protein. And I'm sure there'll probably be a little room left for a little bit of carbs. So.
What do you think about the keto diet, for diabetes and insulin resistance? There are some of the most popular diabetic groups are the keto groups. But if you go into those groups and Nurse Practitioner Deidre, I don't know if you've actually seen what's in some of these groups, but it blows my mind that they're literally promoting eating 5 eggs, a piece of steak, and a few vegetables. And I'm just like, are you kidding? That's not healthy. And then when you go onto YouTube and see keto recipes, they're filled with dairy, just smothered in cheese. And I can't imagine that would be good for you. I mean, they're terrible for me. I'm anaphylactic, so to dairy, but I just can't imagine that much dairy is good for you either.
Right. So what the keto diet is doing is basically by eating in that manner, you're helping to manage blood sugar, right? By reducing carbohydrate intake. So that's why it can be effective, right? But the challenge is it's not suitable for everyone, and isn't even something you can do long term,
See, that's good to
because
know.
Yeah, when you're eating those high fat foods, okay, you're lowering blood sugar, you may get the effects of that, you're helping to control your diabetes, but then the opposite side of that is the fat in those foods and your cholesterol levels and everything. So it's not as balanced as something like the Mediterranean diet is that we see. And some people, they like the keto because in essence, in their mind, get stuck on they can eat the high fat of the keto. But even if you're doing keto, even for a short time to help regulate glucose levels, it should be those lean proteins,
Right. The
right?
healthy fats, nuts, avocado.
Yeah. Yeah. And so definitely talk to your doctor if you're even considering a keto. It's not something that's for everyone.
What about the DASH diet for diabetes? We see that a lot, and we even see it on the American Diabetes Association website
Yeah,
for
that
insulin
emphasizes
resistant.
whole foods, looks at limiting your processed foods, your sodium, and removing unhealthy fats. So that can be really beneficial. It's similar to Mediterranean, there's some similarities there.
What do you think about all of those nutrient companies that are out there that are trying to capitalize? I mean, they're everywhere. They're trying to capitalize on insulin resistance. Right now, it's just this trendy thing, such as the zone living. I mean, what are your thoughts about selecting any one of these? Do you think that selecting one of those programs, one of those nutrients is helpful? Or do you just suggest saying, hey, you know what? I'm just going to be disciplined and I'm going to go after this Mediterranean diet?
Right. Well, it depends on if you feel like you can be disciplined on your own or you need the support of something. But really, you have to prioritize that balanced diet and the healthy lifestyle. And that not only does it include those low glycemic diet, but it also includes like managing your stress level as well. And some of us will need support with that. Some of us will be able to do that on our own. Like we have an event and it changes the trajectory of how we look at our health. Being physically active is really a part of that. So these nutrient companies, if you need the support, look at one that's going to be prioritizing that balanced diet as well.
And if you're in Massachusetts or you are in Florida right now, they're trying to expand across the US, covered by uh, especially Medicare, is Dr. Michael Danziger. Was a medical advisor for The Biggest Loser, and he was also the chief medical officer for Boston Heart Diagnostics that had the most advanced cardiovascular testing. But he's now opened up a diabetes reversal program virtually in Massachusetts and in Florida. So those in those two states, if you have diabetes, type 2 diabetes in particular, he can help you reverse it. He's working with several people in our network right now that are lucky enough to live in Massachusetts and Florida and are taking advantage of that. So exciting. Actually, nurse practitioner Deidre, I should introduce him to you because that might be a way that he can expand into Ohio and working with you.
Yeah.
That might be fun. So I digress. So is insulin resistance actually reversible like type 2 diabetes is?
Yes, it is. It can be reversible through the lifestyle changes, such as improving the diet as well, increasing your activity, weight loss, early intervention, and being consistent. Like everything that you do for your health, if you're consistently doing it day after day, you're going to reap the benefits later, right? And that's part of it. Sometimes we lose the consistency of what we need to be doing. We get discouraged. It's not doing this, but stay at it. Those little lifestyle things can really help reverse insulin resistance. It can prevent the progression to type 2 diabetes. I work with a lot of people with insulin resistance and help like turn the dial back to where they're not having any issues. Part of that for me is also like looking at the gut microbiome and helping with the basically the mucosal layer of the gut, because if we don't make our own, like if our mucosal layer is degraded, we don't make our own natural GLP-1, and that's what these medicines are. Ozempic, Wegovy, all of these meds for diabetes, but we naturally can make GLP-1 in the microbiome in the gut. So it's really looking at the diet and the lifestyle that can help us to optimize what our body was meant to do.
There any key differences in how you would treat a patient who is insulin resistant, not necessarily type 2 diabetic or type 1, or has both insulin resistance and type 2? Are there any key differences in how you would treat one versus another?
Well, there isn't a lot of ways, and it depends individually. Like, can we do this through lifestyle? Like, that's what I look at first. Are we able to achieve this through lifestyle changes, working on stress, getting somebody more physically active? Because if you walk after eating, it lowers the blood sugar spike, right? We hear this all the time with diabetics. Well, that's helpful in insulin resistance as well. And so, just looking at those changes that we can do. But medication wise, some of these meds that are meant for weight loss now can be very helpful in insulin resistance because it also targets leptin, which is that satiety hormone. So there's some great things that are being studied and watched with that as well. I use a lot of herbal stuff. So before you would do that, you would want to talk to a doctor and really get that. Just don't go out and get it. But natural things like berberine. Yeah, that's a really good one to help with insulin resistance.
We have Lawrence that is online here. Lawrence, go ahead and unmute and ask Nurse Practitioner Deidre about the devices. You have a question about devices that are used to monitor.
Uh, yes, my wife before she became an amputee, she had a real hard time with the Libre 2, which is a device that that you could put the patch and then check your numbers. Are is the Libre and other devices like it, are they always accurate when it comes to numbers?
Okay, so they are highly accurate, but here's the thing, they measure a little bit differently. So what he's talking about is continuous glucose monitors. Those are the ones that are worn on the body 24/7. There's several different brands to choose from. The Libre is one of the more popular ones, as well as Dexcom. So you see those two a lot because they're worn for 10 to 14 days. They link to either a cell phone or you get a device. And so what they're measuring is interstitial fluid, right? So that's this fluid, not in the actual like blood stick one that you do when you do a finger prick, right? And it's continuous and it shows trends or patterns. But one thing is, usually it doesn't show the rapid decline as fast. It takes about 10 or 15 minutes for it to catch up to what's really going on. So when somebody's declining quickly, that's why they say a finger prick is going to be more accurate, but it shows you trends. So you can watch the trends that way. Without having all the finger pricks. And then if it starts to decline, just know it's probably going to follow within 5 to 10 minutes to show the crash down. But if you need to take action or do something right then, which either requires like drinking orange juice or getting a protein in, a finger stick would be your backup to that as well, because of that lag time, that period when there's rapid changes.
And for someone like Lawrence and his wife Sue, who's in a rehab facility with for her amputation that he mentioned, any guidance for him, red flags, for those, because she has to eat inside these facilities, and sometimes it's really hard for people inside of these facilities to eat like they should for diabetics. They serve bread, they serve potatoes, they serve rice. Anything that he can say that can help guide them in making sure that she has the right foods on her plate in a facility like that. For example, saying, hey, no rice, no potatoes, no pasta, things like that can just give them a few things to stay away from.
Right. If you were to stay away from the higher glycemic, like rice, like, your white flours, potatoes, things like that. If they can give her, more vegetables, more leafy greens, and your protein. Protein's going to be really great for stabilizing blood sugar, and so asking to get adequate protein. And I think that's where a lot of us fall short too, is that adequate amount of protein. So you take your body weight, that your ideal body weight, and usually it's about half that in grams of protein that she should have.
And he wonders about protein powder. Is protein powder helpful?
Yeah, it can be. Protein powder can be extremely helpful in these situations, or protein drinks. They have those available as well. Just watch, you want one that's meant for a diabetic if you're, watching blood sugars and everything, because some of the protein drinks have high sugar content. So unfortunately, we have to pay attention to everything.
We have a question coming in from Roxy, and she's asking about sourdough bread versus whole grain bread. There are a lot of, cardiovascular papers that talk about whole grains are being the best, but still, and they can actually be high glycemic, can they not? I mean, versus sourdough. Sourdough is now coming out saying, hey, it's actually lower glycemic.
Because of the fermentation process of it, it's really, you're looking at, so truly whole grain, you're getting the grains and everything, but we have a huge majority of people that are not able to tolerate the gluten part of it, like what's the
Yeah.
grains coming in. And so they do tolerate sourdough as an alternative. Um, my thoughts are limit either, both of them. Yeah, that's my
She
thoughts.
says that the doctor said she can have 1 to 2 slices a week,
Yeah.
and that's it. But he actually told her that she should be having sourdough versus having the whole wheat bread.
Yeah, and sometimes and that's probably an individual thing, but it could be that some breads, depending on the gluten, can cause inflammation in there. Sourdough, because of the fermentation, you get less of that, less of a reaction. So there's lots of things to think about. Like I have some patients that I'll tell not to do either one. And some people do fine with whole grains if they're really, but if it's the process, like if you're going to buy your bread, like buy it from the bakery, like let it be baked that way, your whole grains versus the processed ones that are in the bag that we've,
That's actually a really good tip. I like
yeah,
that. I
yeah.
actually, if I do, the interesting thing, I'll get Udi's, which is gluten-free bread, or else I'll get a fresh, but even more fresh sourdough bread because I'm MTHFR, so I'm sensitive to gluten. I don't turn foods into fuel as effectively. And so I try to stay away from it. But it's interesting because the American Heart Association has on their website that the MTHFR mutation is a real deal, a real risk factor for cardiovascular disease, but yet most don't know about it. So for me, I actually call it the silent killer because it can, when you're sitting there and you're talking about the so-called cardiovascular disease reversal diets that are out there, they're real grain based and they talk about eating the whole grains. And the dietitian, when she caught on that my dad was MTHFR, she said, probably would have killed you. That would have exacerbated your cardiovascular disease because it was causing inflammation and damage to your arteries. And so a lot of patients, I don't think, know that they might have the MTHFR mutation. And I heard from one doctor that he says 9 out of 10 patients that I test actually have it and have no idea. So they get on these diets, eat all kinds of whole grains, and they're killing themselves because it causes more damage.
Mhm.
And it might be few and far between. I don't know, but I think that it should be something that every person with a cardiovascular or vascular issue should get checked for. See if you have this MTHFR mutation. And the easiest way, and you can correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I was told first get your B vitamins checked and then get the B absorption checked. Check folate, check folic acid, and check the homocysteine.
Yeah, so you look at vitamin B12 is like a start of things. If you're having like low B12, I would say that could also be gut because your B vitamins are made in your gut. Look at what your folate is doing. But if your homocysteine level is above 7, and that's still normal range, but above 7, we know something's going on there. And so then we know there's an issue with basically taking your folate into all 5 processes that it has to do. And why would the grains be that way? They're fortified folate. So you need a special type of folate, methylfolate. And so the grains fall into that. Everything that we eat, the cereals, grains, it has a fortified folate in it. So
Fantastic. And Lawrence had one more question about blood thinners. So, if you're someone who's a type 2 diabetic or you have insulin resistance and you're told, hey, you need to have a lot of leafy vegetables, they're really good for you. But if you're on Coumadin or warfarin, then you got to limit that vitamin K. So it's you got to make sure that you're consistent, or you could be in trouble. He just wonders if you could explain that.
explain
Why leafy vegetables are a tough sell when it comes to being on Coumadin or warfarin. Why do you have to watch the leafy vegetables, the leafy greens? And it's because of the vitamin K. You have to
right.
limit the vitamin K, which is in those leafy greens. And so what they say is you need to. Sorry, I'm taking over because I coach the patients on this, but it's basically that they say that it's not that you have to not eat them. You're supposed to eat them, but you need to be consistent. If you're going to have a salad every night, make sure you do have a salad every night because when you go to have that blood test, they need to dose your Coumadin or warfarin, your anticoagulant therapy accordingly. And it's going to be all over the place if you have a big leafy green salad one day, the next day you don't, then you have another big one again. It's just your blood work's just going to be all
Yeah.
over the place. So
I couldn't have said it better.
hope that helps, Lawrence. Is there anything else you want to add? I think that we've come to time here. We really appreciate you, Nurse Practitioner Deidre Arms.
Thank you. Oh.
That was a really fun conversation.
It was. It was really fun. There was a question that I was going to address from previously. Somebody had asked right before we ended about why is it that some people can eat like rice and they do well and they don't have insulin resistance? And a lot of that is when we look at culturally, they have these genetic adaptations, right? Over generations, certain populations can develop a genetic adaptation to metabolize carbohydrates differently. And so that's part of it. And then variations in enzyme activity in those genes. So it has to do with not only lifestyle factors, physical activity, meal timing frequency, all of that, but those genetic adaptations. So.
Awesome. Can I ask you, do you prefer white rice, brown rice, forbidden rice?
um, yeah, probably brown rice. Yeah.
Yeah. So next week, what do you think? Before we go, should we decide on a topic? We have Marcia and Douglas that are here in our live studio audience. They're here. They have the first, right to be able to suggest a topic for next week since they're here every single week and always have some great questions and contributions. Unless, Deidre, do you have any ideas for next week?
I'm open to whatever. We've got some great questions and everything, so I'm open to whatever anybody wants to learn.
Yeah, me too. Oh, interesting. That would be,
Okay.
let's talk about fat, baby. Let's talk about all the different things. I think that we could do that. That would
Let's
be
do
good.
it.
We could talk about what do you think, Marcia? Healthy fats, bad fats?
Yes, I want to know. I just got this dip. It's a Mexican pepita dip, so it's made out of seeds. And I'm dying to know, is it bad for me because it's so good. So, and I'm eating it. So I'm hoping that you're going to tell me later that that's good.
Okay, so all the different kinds of fats. I think we could get quite a bit out of that.
I think that would be really fun. And Douglas, what do you think?
Well, and it maybe that kind of goes along with what I asked you last week about the blueberries.
Oh, you want to talk about, oh, yeah, I think that actually we could actually plan even out. Douglas had a really interesting encounter with Dr. Grundy. And blueberries. And he was saying that they're absolutely unhealthy. And what's really frustrating is if you belong to all these newsletters have clickbait. And you could argue that even the healthiest of healthiest things, they're bad if you eat too much of it, just like with chia seeds. Chia seeds are amazing. They're really healthy. They can lower your blood pressure. They can lower your insulin. But if you're on high blood pressure medications and you're on insulin, this is actually a good point to bring. That's going to be trouble. It's going to help. The chia seeds work so well that it's going to screw up your blood pressure. It's going to screw up your insulin dosage. So you can have too much of a good thing. And it just depends on who you are, your presentation of disease, making sure whatever you're eating is in moderation. And also what Deidre says all the time, it's the sequence in which you're eating it is also really key. So it would be interesting to do, if we do fats next week, then the week after, um, how healthy are fruits? So
Okay.
the pros and cons of eating fruit. So from spiking, there's actually, I have a patient, and it might be interesting if he will come here and be honest. His daughter, it has her PhD. She's a doctorate in diet. And she had her dad reverse his type 2 diabetes by only eating fruit. I don't know how that's possible. I didn't get into it, but it'd be interesting to hear his story. And when I asked her about it, she said that it was literally because he was dedicated. Most people would not be as diligent as her dad to follow the diet to the T. And it was, in fact, all fruit and the sequence of fruit, the types of fruit that he was eating. So that would be really interesting. And with Douglas, Dr. Grundy had
It
said,
was just that almost not everything, but everything that he was talking about was the rainbow that we talk about.
he was talking about it in a negative light.
Yeah, the rain. Eat this like Martian talk about squash. He said squash not good for you, and blueberries aren't good for you. Don't eat blueberries at all. And it was like,
But yeah, the thing is you get confused. Go ahead and forward that to me so I can forward it to her, because I think that this is really a good point. And I think it goes back to your whole, I think we even need, and I'm glad we're airing this live. We need a whole discussion just on the power of the gut, the issues, like how everything really starts in your gut. Um, because then I think where you're going with the zucchini is you're going towards zucchini falls in the lineup of what do you call them, the dark shades, the nightshades.
Nightshades. Yeah.
And for me, I'm actually allergic to nightshades. Although I compromise. I have to have my eggplant and mushrooms. If I need to take a Benadryl, I'm going to take a Benadryl because those are so good. And sometimes I need that purple. I'm going to taste the rainbow. I need purple. So it's either going to be a purple grape or it's going to be an eggplant. And I love my eggplant.
Yeah.
But nightshades can be dangerous for some people with certain digestive systems, possibly.
Mhm.
So that might be what he was talking about. And so they put out these the clickbait, and unless you're actually really reading into it, you don't get the point.
Yeah.
And that's what even Marcia is saying. It's like how confusing all the advice and expert opinions can be, and you never know whether someone is putting out a headline just for clickbait or if there's really something more to
Right.
just everybody's living in fear. And and what
Well,
we
and
see out there.
if you read it, I watched his video, you wait till the end. Now he's selling this MCT product that's supposed to be this magical cure to help you fix everything. And he's apparently this top cardiologist in California, one of the
Yeah,
best
he's
in
out
the
in Palm
world.
Springs.
And he, and it was like, I read it, it was like, well, that, like Marsha said, it kind of goes against, it's like that confusing part about, it was like, damn, I love my blueberries and I'm ready to do the squash, but now I guess I won't eat them.
My thoughts on whole foods and that most people, the problem comes in with the processed foods.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Yeah.
And I mean, if I could eat zucchini every day, honest to God, I would eat zucchini every day. That was my staple before I learned that it was literally my number one vegetable that I'm allergic to. I would make spaghetti noodles. I would make my noodles out of it. Um, and Marcia brings up another one is, yeah, starchy vegetables. That's another issue. When we have our book, I need to send you our book, Deidre, because we're going to be doing, it's called Food for Thought. It's available on Amazon. We're going to be redoing certain aspects of it, taking certain people out, adding other people in. Would love to have you as one of the editors in it. So, let me know what pages that you can add in it. And then you can be a part of the team and we'll publish the new version with some of the updated things. So I can send it to you and you can mark it up and tell me kind of what topics you'd like to address in there. And I think nutrient deficiencies would be huge. We don't have anything on that in there. So that would be, I have one little section, and one part of it is we have this food tree though, that says you should only have starchy vegetables once a week, which is more the functional medicine practitioner diet that we have in there. So we only eat starchy vegetables now once a week.
Okay.
So it'll be interesting to learn all this. So what are we doing next week? We're going to be talking about
Fats.
bad fats and healthy fats.
Yeah.
That'll be really fun. I'm excited. So send me some of your, and if people are watching this, go ahead and send in any questions that you have ahead of time. We'll post and find out what people want to hear about. We'll just put up, Douglas or Marcia, if you can post in the group and say, hey, we're going to be talking about fats next Wednesday. We're just going to look, open it up and say, if we put out the topic of fats, what are the types of things that you'd want to know about it? So, and we'll start to get the list and figure out how we can put it together. And the next week we'll talk about fruits.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really want to dig into the antioxidants. So
Of the fruits.
yeah.
Or just,
Looking
or
forward
do you
to
want
that
to do?
one.
Yeah. Or I mean, I'm with you. I mean, I'm all about. I'll send you the study that's out there on blueberries. That blueberries 1 to 2 cups a day, and you can explain it probably better than I would be able to, but. I was reading, I think it said that it changes the viscosity of the blood, like literally within hours of having these blueberries. And they even saw after people were eating baked goods with real blueberries in there, it was still having some sort of an impact.
Mm-hmm.
And there are studies that are out there with it. So that could be interesting.
Yeah, we'll talk about antioxidants.
So fruits in general, or do you want to just nail the antioxidant as the topic? What are your antioxidants? Well, because if you talk about general antioxidants, it's not just fruit, but it's a lot of other things.
Yeah, so we'll kind of, it probably will go into that very well.
Okay, so we're still doing fruits, but we're gonna nail those antioxidants as part of that.
Yeah. So
Fantastic. Well, we're really excited for everyone joining us. See, you got to be a part of not only an incredible educational session teaching you about insulin resistance, but you got to be a part of our plenary session of the upcoming weeks and what we want to talk about, so you know what's ahead. So I hope everyone makes sure, mark your calendars for Wednesday. We're going to be talking about fats. That is the same bat time, same bad channel, 4:30 Eastern time, 1:30 Pacific, 3:30 Central Time. And then the following week, we're going to be talking about fruits, but really hitting home the idea of consuming those antioxidants, the power of antioxidants. So definitely make sure you subscribe to our channel. Make sure you follow the playlist for Desire Wellness, because every single week we are taking all of this amazing information that Deidre is giving us, and we're just paring it down into smaller clips, digestible clips, based on the different questions and topics that are asked. So thanks everyone for joining us. We will